Hey guys, welcome back to Trek on the Tube. I've been promising this one for a while, so here it is. Star Trek Races, Andorians. Now for both the Vulcans and the Klingons, I started off by saying how much of an impact those races had on Star Trek and pop culture in general. Sadly, I can't do the same for Andorians. They didn't really get a lot of screen time throughout the whole of Star Trek and don't often come up in conversation, even among Trekkies. But they were part of the founding members of the Federation, which means even if they don't seem like a big deal, in universe, they are very important. So these Andorians, what do they look like? Well, like a lot of Star Trek races, it depends. But the general idea is that they have varying degrees of blue skin, white hair, and two antennae. Though, as you'll see, that description applies to a very broad spectrum of visual styles. The first time we ever see them is in the 1967 original series episode Journey to Babel. The Enterprise is transporting ambassadors from many Federation worlds to some conference, and the Andorians are to attend. Now the interesting thing about this first appearance is it teaches us virtually nothing about them, except for the fact they exist and they're part of the Federation. Nothing is said about their culture or way of life, and we don't see them enough to get an idea of what they're like. The worst part is, by the end of the episode, we actually find out one of them is an Orion spy. He was trying to disrupt the conference disguised as an Andorian. So the first time we ever see them, we kind of don't. Of course, they do return 3 more times in the original series, and you might be thinking, 3 times? That's more than enough to dive into their backstory, but no, that never happens. In one episode, we see an Andorian held captive and forced to participate in fights on an alien planet. Then we see another one in a Federation prison, and then the final 2 we see on screen are already dead when the Enterprise arrives. As you can see, they were pretty disposable, and things don't get much better in the animated series either. I mean, we only see them twice more, and barely. In the second episode, history is changed by Kirk and Spock, and when they get back to an alternate present, they find themselves face to face with this guy. First thing you'll notice is he's clearly grey, not blue. The script had him down as blue, but the coloring practices of animation at the time created the error. Retroactively, to explain this, it was simply said that Andorians have different skin pigmentations. Now, as if to carry on some sort of tradition, we barely see this guy throughout the episode, and by the end of it, the proper timeline is re-established, so he just disappears. Awesome. We then very briefly see another Andorian a few episodes later. No time is spent explaining anything about him, but he is blue, which I suppose is the biggest win we're gonna get at this point, considering following the animated series, we only see them a couple more times in the movies and the Next Generation, without ever learning anything more about who they are. I mean, until Enterprise, but more on that later. As you would expect with Star Trek, I mean, they do this with pretty much every race ever, each iteration brings its own visual redesign, some of which are more complicated to explain than others, but as we said earlier, it all remains within the same broad description. Blue skin, mostly, white hair, and antennae. Something worth noting is the antennae on this guy from Star Trek IV The Voyage Home are no longer far back on his head, they've been moved closer to his forehead. So Star Trek Enterprise, the 2001 prequel to the original series. Though it had many flaws, one of the things it did do right was finally show us more Andorians. And it all began with an episode called The Andorian Incident. Funny thing is, no one really knew who was going to be the villains in this episode until Brannon Braga decided to bring them back. His idea was to take the silliest looking race and make them look cool. And due to advances in technology and makeup, it was a huge success. The light blue skin of the original series was brought back, but the antennae were closer to the forehead like in Star Trek IV. Their blue blood was shown for the first time, and we also learnt that their antennae could grow back, within 9 months naturally and half that with treatment. The antennae helped Andorians with balance and also did a good job conveying emotion. You see, for Enterprise, they actually made them radio controlled, so someone offset could move them back and forth depending on what the scene demanded. This new look was kept throughout the entire series, and considering they had more on-screen appearances on Enterprise than in all of the rest of Star Trek, it became the most recognizable. But Enterprise did much more than establish a final look. It actually took the time to explain more about who they are. So straight away, we learn they've been capable of space flight for decades. Not only have they been exploring, but also making enemies. They're at odds with the Vulcans and the Tellarites. It's a good thing those good old humans appear just in the nick of time to help appease tensions. Keep in mind we are talking about the 2150s at the moment. Things do change with time, but we'll talk about that later on. Andorians are passionate, emotional, and take great pride in their military service. Being a part of the Imperial Guard is considered a great honor, and their rank can actually influence social reputation. Like many other races, Andorians enjoy respecting seemingly barbaric and overcomplicated ancient traditions, one of which, as usual, is fights to the death, known here as the Ushan. One can, for example, demand combat to avenge the death of a loved one. Another tradition is to bring home some blood from deceased officers and companions. In certain cases, the blood could even be taken to a place called the Wall of Heroes. Andorians are known to be resistant to a wide range of environmental conditions, probably due to the fact they evolved not on a temperate planet like ours, but on a frozen moon. Ice cutting is even a big thing for them. They use ice cutters in their duels and name ships after ice cutting legends. This, by the way, is sadly the only Andorian ship class we've seen so far. But there is an in-universe explanation for that. Along with humans, Vulcans, and Tellarites, the Andorians founded the United Federation of Planets in 2161. From that moment on, resources were put in common, and Starfleet was created. Though we have seen a few Vulcan ships in the Next Generation, they're generally old in design, and so it's pretty safe to assume that these four races focused on creating a common fleet rather than each their own. Think of it this way. The Enterprise, A or D or whichever one in between, is a Starfleet ship. And so it's as much Andorian as it is Tellarite, as it is Vulcan, as it is human. Regarding Star Trek Discovery, there's really nothing much to say, except for the fact I would really want to see at least one Andorian on the show. I mean, it only seems logical, all things considered. This, I don't know if you remember, is one of the first promotional photos that they actually showed us, and it looks pretty Andorian to me, so you never know. We might be getting lucky on this one. Regarding the Kelvin timeline, we never see any Andorians. We actually never even hear about them either. For all we know, the Vulcans wiped them out before humans even got to space. Got it. Okay, well, that's about it for today. Before I go, these guys technically count as another race. That's why I didn't talk about them. But they did evolve on the same moon as the Andorians. That explains why they resemble each other so much, and it might also explain the gray Andorian from the animated series. Alright, well, there you go. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me what you think about the Andorians. I wanted to end this by saying goodbye in Andorian, but I don't know how to do that. I don't even know if we have an Andorian greeting in Star Trek, so I'll just finish this off by being as racist as they are. See you, Pinkskins.